خلينا ندخل الناس. Good morning everyone. صباح الخير. أنا أفوت أطلع عن العربي ولا كيف نفس الطالع عندي؟ Alright.
Morning, صباح الخير.
Good morning everyone. Thanks for joining this event. First, for the translation and interpretation, you may choose Arabic or English room from the icon interpretation below. And there is some instruction available on chat for everyone to be, because we'll be talking in English and Arabic, so there will be interpretation available. So, good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Palestinian Initiative of Promotion of Global Dialogue and Democracy, Miftah, I'm honored to welcome you all to this virtual parallel event during the 70th session of CSW, Commission of Status of Women, which is entitled Assassinated Justice, Palestinian Women Between Genocide and Ethnic Cleansing. I'm Maram Zaatera, Director of Good Governance Program at Miftah, and I'm pleased to moderate this event. Our event today comes at a critical moment and is crucial as to shed light on the reality of assassinated justice, which is part of the advocacy digital campaign that is launched by feminist Palestinian organization. And that's due to the US discriminatory measures in 2025 that have seriously challenged the international justice mechanism and the UN human rights system. The expanded travel ban now targets holders of Palestinian passports along with nationals from other countries, barring women from participating physically in the Commission on the Status of Women and directly contradicting the CSW's session theme, which is access to justice. Today, we will explore the realities of Palestinian women under occupation in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, and will examine how systematic violence, forced displacement, discrimination intersect with a gender-based oppression, leaving women without meaningful access to justice or protection. We will also discuss the impact of genocide, military policies, settler violence, and humanitarian crisis on Palestinian women's rights, dignity, and security. Through legal, feminist, and human rights perspective, our discussion today will call for accountability, international action, inclusive justice framework that amplify Palestinian women voices and experience. So again, I'd like to welcome you all for attending this event and welcome the speakers that will be with us for the different panels that we have today to speak more about the injustice that we're facing. So we'll start today the event with Ms. Mirvat Rishmawi. She's a senior Palestinian human rights independent consultant, has particular interest and expertise in women's rights, including women, peace and security agenda, economic, social rights, and rights of older persons. She previously worked for 12 years at the International Secretariat at Amnesty International as the legal advisor to the Middle East and North Africa. She also conducts specialized training on human rights standards and mechanisms, holding master in international human rights. So the intervention would be, Mirvat, for you today is to talk more about the focus of the violation of international law by Israel in the OPT, collapse of accountability. So it's over to you, Mirvat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maram, and good morning, everyone. What I would like to do is to talk about not only what violations happen, but why these violations happen. So to put it in a context. And the first thing that I would like to draw your attention to, or things that we all know, but just to frame it, is that what we are talking about are not violations that affect individuals or individual communities, but are violations against all Palestinians as Palestinians. So that's what we will see from the different interventions, and that's what I will demonstrate in my intervention. The other thing is that, as we all know, these violations did not start with just recently. They started with the start of the illegal occupation in 1967. Also, if we all adopt life cycle approach, we understand that these violations have to be understood in the context of the Nakba, where many of the persons affected became refugees, lost their uh, homeland, lost their properties, lost their land, and became dispossessed. And therefore, uh, all of us are affected by the Nakba one way or another. Either our parents became refugees or grandparents, or we are a generation that grew up with the Nakba, or we are a generation that understood the Nakba, and therefore this is part of our history and so on. So, just to draw your attention, the UN Commission of Inquiry said that the violations that are happening in Gaza or happened in Gaza affect 80% of people whom are families that were previously forced to flee Gaza to Gaza as refugees. So that's the Commission of Inquiry, the UN Commission of Inquiry itself. The second point I would like to make, which is basically the basic point of this intervention, is that we have to understand these crimes in their cumulative effect. It's important not to think about each individual crime against an individual or a community or whatever, but there are crimes that happen as part of patterns, policies that have cumulative effect of gravity that lead us to think about grave crimes under international law, and we will see what kind of grave crimes we are talking about. So if I can give you one example, we hear about arbitrary system of denying permits to build houses in East Jerusalem. Okay, we can think about it as denial of right to housing. There is also the unlawful demolition of Palestinian homes, demolishing of houses, illegal demolishing of houses, increased attacks on communities by settlers and soldiers, physical integrity and physical safety, methodological destruction of entire neighborhoods. Again, then we think about attacks on refugee camps, as what happened in Jenin and Tulkarem in the West Bank, and of course what we know about Gaza, and destruction of civilian infrastructure. If we think of all of those together, what do we understand? The only thing that we can conclude is that these all together are aimed at forcible transfer, to transfer population, Palestinians, from certain areas to other areas in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, including East Jerusalem. Together, these raise concerns over ethnic cleansing. Therefore, we are not talking about house demolishing. We are not talking about settler violence and so on. We are talking about ethnic cleansing in both Gaza and the West Bank. The other example that I will focus on is, for example, as we know, there is the forcible transfer of population in the Gaza Strip as well. There is what we saw in Gaza recently in the last few years is the intentional destruction of healthcare facilities. Okay, right to health, attacks against medical facilities, units, personnel, and so on. Right to health. Starvation as a method of war. Again, denial of entry for special infant milk. What do we understand from that? Again, I mean, it's the health of children. Children have been directly targeted. So we can talk about rights of the child. Methods of war and types of weapons used to show consistent pattern that caused and was intended to cause a large number of casualties. Again, I mean, we can think about it as health and casualties and life and so on. Systematic destruction of Palestinian homes, including and the infrastructure, including agricultural lands and other properties. Elements of the Palestinian identity, especially cultural identity, in the Gaza Strip. Mass killing, bombing, shelling, so on and so forth. What do you understand from all of that? One, the Israelis, and that's what the conclusion of the Commission of Inquiry, the UN Commission of Inquiry, concluded that the Israeli authorities were aware that by destroying the health system throughout Gaza, their actions would lead to the destruction of Palestinians as a group. The Commission therefore found that Israeli authorities knowingly and deliberately inflicted such conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of Palestinians in Gaza. What does that mean? Genocide. Simply genocide. On the basis of fully conclusive evidence, that's what the Commission said, the Israelis have committed and is committing genocide. In addition to the genocide, they talked about war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, ethnic cleansing, starvation as a method of warfare, sexual and gender-based crimes as methods of war, and so on. So it's important not to think of each one of these as individual violation that affects individuals or communities or a group. These all together mean something. And that's my main point here. The other important point is to think about the long-term impact. These violations are done to have a long term.
D'une certaine manière,
It's
qui
not
pourrait viser les
only
bases de l'OTAN,
immediate.
qui pourrait effectivement engager un peu comme à Chypre.
What's happening?
That's fine. You can continue.
Yeah. So
Perfect.
why are these violations happening? Obviously, Israel is violating its obligations under international law, but also other states are violating their obligations under international law. Israel has obligations under international human rights law, international humanitarian law, international criminal law, other types of international law. For example, Article 1, Common Article 1, other states have obligations. Common Article 1 of the Geneva Conventions require states to respect and ensure respect of the conventions by other states. Therefore, they must ensure respect by Israel. We will see now whether they have done that or not. The Arms Trade Treaty, Article 6, paragraph 3, says, if a state has the knowledge at the time of authorization that the arms items would be used in the commission of genocide, crimes against humanity, grave breaches of the Geneva Convention, attacks directed against civilians, and so on, the transfer should not be carried out. Did the international community know? Yes, they did. They have been alerted to that several times through the UN Commission of Inquiry, through the Special Rapporteurs, through the UNRWA, through OCHA, through so on and so forth, and international organizations and national Palestinian and Israeli organizations. So they did know. They cannot say that they did not know. The Convention on the Prevention of the Crime of Genocide requires states to, under Article 1 of the Genocide, to prevent and punish acts of genocide. Have they done that? Have they prevented? Have they punished any of that? No, nothing so far. Therefore, and in addition to that, let's think maybe of the WPS, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and other frameworks. It's important to note that the WPS agenda, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, did not create new obligations. The agenda reminds all the Security Council resolutions under the agenda remind states of their existing obligations, including under CEDAW, including under international humanitarian law, including the Arms Trade Treaty. Therefore, all what we talked about in a minute are relevant also as under the WPS agenda. Also, states adopt other frameworks like their feminist foreign policies, or they make statements in the UN, or they in their WPS national action plans, they make commitments and so on. However, despite their declared commitments, states continue their support to the Israeli occupation, although the International Court of Justice said it is illegal Israeli occupation. They are continuing or even increasing their military support. They're continuing their economic support, including trade with products from or to illegal settlements, which enables Israel to continue its illegal occupation. They continue their diplomatic measures and denial of accountability. So states are enabling the unlawful occupation to continue. This is resulting in the continuation of the violations of the crimes against the Palestinian women and girls. Therefore, as long as the Israeli occupation continues, violations and crimes against women and girls, and I have to say against all Palestinians, will continue. The only answer is to end the Israeli occupation, the illegal occupation as such. States are shielding Israel from accountability, as we said. They are, through their votes in the UN, through their not bringing anybody to justice. There is military cooperation that is enabling Israel to continue that violation. So this is ultimately continuing the unlawful occupation. Let's remind ourselves that Article 26 of the UN Charter stresses that effective steps must be taken to promote the establishment and maintenance of international peace and security with the least diversion of armaments of the world's human and economic resources. Least diversion of armaments. What is happening is the opposite. As a result of these obligations and the advisory opinion of the ICJ on the illegality of the occupation, states have a duty to conduct a review of all their transfer and trade agreements with Israel. States must stop the sale, transfer, diversion of arms, munition, and other military equipment to Israel, as well as cooperation through other military cooperation and other cooperation in violation of international law in order to end the occupation. And I will end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mirvat, for this important intervention focusing on those violation of international law, and especially on the collapse of accountability, and especially on the issues related to cumulative effect of the crimes, war crimes, and the long-term impact of it. So thank you so much for this intervention. We'll move now to my colleague Shadia Al-Ghoul. She's head of Miftah Gaza office. She's a researcher, writer, and community leader from Gaza. During the genocide, Shadia managed a shelter under conditions of scarcity, fear, and no guarantee, where every decision was an act of responsibility. Her leadership focuses on managing losses, minimizing harm, and protecting, transforming individual survival into collective organization, and linking ground realities to political accountability to ensure resilience. Shadia will give more update about a recent update on the status of women in Gaza under the continuous genocide. So her intervention will be in Arabic. So I'll kindly ask you all who's using the English to move to the interpretation English room down from the globe icon at bottom. So Shadia, over to you. Shadia,
شكرا مرام.
اتفضلي.
أوكي. السيدات والسادة، تخيلوا لحظة واحدة أنكم امرأة تحاولون حماية أطفالكم في مدينة لم يبقى فيها شيء على حاله. أن تستيقظوا صباحا فلا تجدوا المنزل الذي كان يأويكم، ولا المدرسة التي كان أطفالكم يذهبون إليها، ولا المستشفى الذي كنتم تقصدونه عندما يمرض أحدهم. تخيلوا أن الطريق إلى الأمان نفسه أصبح طريقا من الركام. في مثل هذا المكان يصبح كل قرار يومي قراراً بين الحياة والموت، بين الطعام أو الجوع، بين الأمان أو الخوف، بين البقاء أو الفقدان. في غزة هذا ليس خيالاً، إنها الحياة اليومية لأكثر من 1,000,000 امرأة وفتاة يعيشون اليوم بين النزوح والدمار بعد سنوات من العنف الواسع النطاق الذي أعاد تشكيل كل تفاصيل الحياة. فقد قتلت آلاف النساء.
شادية لو سمحتي بتقدري تكملي في مداخلتك بدون ما توقفي لأنه الترجمة فورية.
وفقدت آلاف أخريات منازلهن وسبل العيشهن، وأصبحت فجأة معيلات لأسرهن في مجتمع دمرت بنيته الاقتصادية والاجتماعية بالكامل. كل يوم تحرم النساء من أبسط حقوقهن: الحق في الحياة، الحق في الأمان، الحق في الكرامة. اليوم نقف هنا لنقول الحقيقة بوضوح: ما حدث في غزة لا يمكن اختزاله في توصيف نزع سلاح تقليدي، بل يمثل مستوى واسع من العنف الواقع على مجتمع مدني بأكمله، حيث استخدم التدمير واسع النطاق والتجويع والحصار كأدوات ضغط على السكان. وكل دقيقة صمت من المجتمع الدولي أمام هذه الحقيقة هي دقيقة تضيف معاناة جديدة إلى حياة النساء الفلسطينيات. السيدات والسادة، نحن لا نتحدث اليوم عن حدث انتهى، بل عن آثار مستمرة لسنوات من الدمار ما زالت النساء في غزة يعشن نتائجها كل يوم. تشير تقديرات صادرة عن الأمم المتحدة إلى أن النساء والأطفال شكلوا ما يقارب 70% من الضحايا المدنيين خلال الهجمات على قطاع غزة. كما تقدر هيئة الأمم المتحدة للمرأة أن أكثر من 28,000 امرأة وفتاة قتلن منذ أكتوبر 23، أي بمعدل يقترب من امرأة أو فتاة تقتل كل ساعة خلال فترة الإبادة. آلاف من هؤلاء النساء كن أمهات، ما ترك خلفهن أعدادا كبيرة من الأطفال الذين فقدوا الحماية الأسرية الأساسية. تشير تحليلات بحثية دولية إلى أن عدد الضحايا الفعلي قد يكون أعلى من الأرقام الموثقة رسميا، إذا أخذت في عين الاعتبار الوفيات غير المباشرة الناتجة عن الجوع والمرض وانهيار النظام الصحي. لكن القتل المباشر لم يكن الشكل الوحيد للعنف، فوفقا لتقارير مكتب الأمم المتحدة لتنسيق الشؤون الإنسانية، تعرض قطاع غزة إلى تدمير واسع للبنية التحتية المدنية، شمل المستشفيات والمدارس وشبكات المياه والكهرباء. كما وثقت المؤسسات الإنسانية قيوداً متزايدة على دخول المساعدات الإنسانية، إلى جانب تدهور غير مسبوق في الأمن الغذائي. وقد تفاقم هذا الوضع بشكل حاد في الأشهر الأخيرة بعد التطورات الإقليمية المرتبطة بالحرب بين إسرائيل وإيران، حيث أدى التصعيد الإقليمي إلى تشديد إغلاق المعابر المؤدية إلى قطاع غزة. وقد ترتب على ذلك تعطل دخول المساعدات الإنسانية بشكل كبير، في وقت أصبحت فيه غالبية السكان تعتمد بشكل شبه كامل على المساعدات للبقاء. في السياق ذاته، واجهت العديد من المنظمات الإنسانية والدولية صعوبات كبيرة في استمرار بعملها داخل القطاع، نتيجة عدم تجديد التراخيص والتصاريح اللازمة لعمل المؤسسات الدولية، الأمر الذي حد من قدرة هذه المؤسسات على إدخال المساعدات أو تنفيذ برامج الإغاثة الأساسية. هذه القيود لم تؤثر فقط على تدفق الغذاء والدواء، بل أثرت أيضاً على الاقتصاد الإنساني بالكامل داخل غزة. السيدات والسادة، إلى جانب الأزمة الإنسانية، يعيش قطاع غزة أيضاً أزمة مالية واقتصادية غير مسبوقة. فمنذ الإبادة وحتى اليوم ما تزال البنوك مغلقة أو تعمل بشكل محدود للغاية، مما أدى إلى توقف تدفق الأموال إلى داخل القطاع، وتعطل قدرة السكان على الوصول إلى مدخراتهم أو تحويلاتهم المالية. وأصبحت النساء وخاصة المعيلات لأسرهن يواجهن صعوبة يومية في الحصول على السيولة النقدية. حتى المعاملات اليومية البسيطة أصبحت تحديداً شبه مستحيل بسبب تداول أوراق نقدية مهترئة أو قديمة نتيجة عدم إدخال عملات جديدة إلى القطاع. كما يواجه السكان مشكلة إضافية تتمثل في عدم توفر الفكة أو العملات الصغيرة، مما يجعل حتى شراء الاحتياجات الأساسية أمراً معقداً في ظل اقتصاد شبه منهار. هذه التفاصيل قد تبدو تقنية، لكنها في الواقع تمس الحياة اليومية للنساء بشكل مباشر. فالأم التي تحاول شراء خبز لأطفالها أو دواء لأبنائها أو دفع أجرة للنقل للوصول إلى المستشفى قد تجد نفسها عاجزة، ليس فقط بسبب الفقر، بل بسبب انهيار النظام المالي بالكامل. السيدات والسادة، اليوم تعيش أكثر من 1,000,000 امرأة وفتاة في غزة في ظروف إنسانية بالغة القسوة. تشير التقديرات الإنسانية إلى أن أكثر من 85% من سكان القطاع تعرضوا للنزوح القسري مرة واحدة على الأقل، وفي أكثر من الحالات عاشت النساء في خيام أو مدارس مكتظة تفتقر إلى الخصوصية والخدمات الصحية الأساسية. في هذه البيئة الهشة تتحمل النساء العبء الأكبر للحفاظ على بقاء أسرهن. تشير تقديرات المؤسسات الإنسانية إلى أن أكثر من 57,000 أسرة في غزة أصبحت تعيلها نساء بعد فقدان الأزواج أو المعيلين نتيجة القتل أو الإصابة. هذه النساء وجدن أنفسهن فجأة مسؤولات عن إعالة الأطفال وكبار السن في اقتصاد منهار بالكامل. وعلى صعيد الأمن الغذائي، حذرت وكالات الأمم المتحدة من أن جميع سكان غزة تقريبا يواجهن مستويات حادة من انعدام الأمن الغذائي. في مثل هذه الظروف غالبا ما تكون النساء أول من يضحين بحصصهن الغذائية لضمان بقاء أطفالهن، وهكذا تتحمل أجساد النساء عبء الجوع وسوء التغذية إلى جانب الصدمات النفسية المستمرة. السيدات والسادة، إن ما يحدث في غزة اليوم يطرح أسئلة قانونية وأخلاقية عميقة. فالقانون الدولي الإنساني واضح، استهداف المدنيين محظور، التجويع كسلاح حرب محظور، العقاب الجماعي للسكان المدنيين محظور، كما تلزم اتفاقية منع جريمة الإبادة الجماعية المجتمع الدولي ليس فقط بمنع الإبادة بل أيضا بمنعها ومعاقبة مرتكبيها. ومع ذلك فإن الفجوة بين الالتزامات القانونية والواقع على الأرض كانت صارخة. إن استمرار الإفلات من العقاب لا يقوض فقط حقوق الضحايا بل يقوض أيضا مصداقية النظام القائم على سيادة القانون. سيداتي، إن النساء الفلسطينيات لا يطالبن التعاطف فقط بل يطالبن شيء أكثر أساسية: العدالة. عدالة تعترف بما حدث، عدالة تحاسب المسؤولون عن الانتهاكات، عدالة تضمن أن تكون النساء الفلسطينيات جزءاً أساسياً من أي عملية تعافي أو إعادة إعمار أو مسار سياسي قادم. فالنساء في غزة لم يكن فقط ضحايا لهذه المأساة، لكن كن أيضاً العمود الفقري لبقاء المجتمع، وهن من حافظ على عائلاتهن، وهن من نظمن التضامن المجتمعي في مراكز النزوح، وهن من تحملن العبء اليومي وإعادة بناء الحياة فوق أنقاض المدن. لهذا فإن العدالة التي لا تسمع للنساء ولا تعترف بمعاناتهن ولا تحاسب منتهكي حقوقهن ليست عدالة ناقصة فحسب بل عدالة مختالة. السيدات والسادة، هنالك مسألة ظهرت حديثاً يجب الإشارة إليها، وهي معاناة النساء التي ذهبت أو اضطرت إلى الذهاب للعلاج في إحدى الدول المجاورة في خارج قطاع غزة، وجميعهن كانن مصابات، سواء كانت من الاستهداف المباشر من الاحتلال الإسرائيلي أو مريضات سرطان أو ما غير ذلك. فبالتالي تركن أبنائهن وبناتهن وأزواجهن بالإبادة وخرجن للعلاج بالخارج. اليوم وبعد ما يسمى فتح المعبر، عادت بعض النساء حتى تلتحم مع أبنائها وبناتها لتجد معاناة من نوع آخر، وهي معاناة اختطاف النساء والفتيات ما بعد دخولهن من الجانب المصري من قبل الاحتلال الإسرائيلي، وتعرضهما للكثير من الانتهاكات، على سبيل المثال تقييد الأيدي والأرجل وتعصيم العينين، والتحقيق معهن لفترات تصل إلى 4 إلى 5 ساعات، بالتهديد بالقتل والتهجير وإصابة أبنائهم أو أخوانهم، ومن ثم العرض عليهن للعمل كمرشدين أو متخابرين مع الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. هذا ما وثقته المؤسسات من هؤلاء النساء التي يعدن حديثا. ولكن للعلم يجب التنويه أن المعبر لم يفتح منذ بداية الحرب على إيران. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا عزيزتي شادية على هاي المداخلة المهمة واللي وقفت فيها كتير على موضوع الآثار المستمرة والمعاناة المستمرة لحرب الإبادة على النساء والأطفال خاصة في قطاع غزة على جميع الأصعدة. وزي ما شرحتيها هي عدالة مختالة، هي عدالة ليست منقوصة، هي عدالة مختالة. واللي ذكرتيه آخر إشي في نوع الجديد من اللي يمكن بتعرض إلى النساء، يمكن لازم نعمل له جلسة خاصة لاحقا. فشكرا لك عزيزتي شادية. So now we'll move to the third speaker. She would be Melina Ansari. Melina, she's a Palestinian lawyer with a master international law and human rights. Over the years, Melina worked and focused on defending Palestinian human rights with leading international and Palestinian human rights organizations by documenting and analyzing systematic violations of Palestinian rights, including those held in Israel detention and Palestinian children's rights. Melina intervention will shed light today on layered injustice, status of the Palestinian women in the Israeli detention. Over to you, Melina.
Thank you, Maram, and thank you for Miftah for organizing this panel discussion, and thank you for my esteemed panelists for joining. Shadia, you painted a really traumatizing and horrible image of what Palestinian women in the Gaza Strip are facing, and thank you for giving us a snippet of what the reality is. Thank you also for the attendees for your time and your attention. I'll focus in the beginning a bit on women and girls inside the Israeli detention, sharing some statistics, numbers, who these individuals are, and then I'll say how do Palestinian women and girls end up in Israeli detention, and the documented conditions by Palestinian organizations, Israeli organizations, international organizations, and even UN entities, including the Commission of Inquiry, as well as OHCHR. So to begin with, you know, while violence against Palestinian women and girls is often discussed in the context of Israel's settler, colonial, and apartheid regime, it is equally important to examine what happens even inside detention. So for Palestinian women and girls, detention becomes another site where systematic oppression and domination continue. Control, humiliation, violation of dignity and bodily autonomy and basic rights continue and prevail. As of March 2026, the Israeli occupation are imprisoning and detaining 72 Palestinian women and girls. Among them are 3 minors. 3 girls under the age of 18 are currently inside Israeli detention, and 32 mothers who are responsible for a total of 130 children. Most of the Palestinian women and girls are detained in Damoun prison. And let me emphasize here, Damoun prison is located in northern Haifa, which is considered inside Israel proper. So this alone, the detention of Palestinians outside of their occupied territory is a war crime of illegal transfer of an occupied population outside of their territory. And why I emphasized on looking at numbers, because while 72, when you compare it to the total of 10,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees, it feels like a small number. What I urge you to do is look at this number of the individual experiences and individual stories of women and girls. We're talking about 130 children deprived of their mother because they are inside Israeli detention. And these women, they represent a broad cross-section of the Palestinian society. What I mean by this, among the Palestinian women inside Israeli detention are university students, school students, journalists, human rights defenders, activists, and simply mothers of Palestinians who are already in detention or wanted Palestinians. So 12 of the Palestinian women inside detention are are university students. 18 of them are women who suffer from medical conditions, including 3 women with cancer who are detained. And there was 1 woman who was wounded during her arrest and detention. Again, 17 women are under administrative detention. So basically, there's no charge against them, no trial, but they're held under a precautionary measure that in the future, they might commit a security offense against the apparatus of the Israeli system. So 17 women held without charge and trial. And this is, is in broader context of how increased the use of administrative detention is as a legal loophole. So if there is no actual crime someone committed, Israeli authorities simply cite secret information and they detain a person indefinitely. There are also 5 women serving long sentences. The longest is 16 years. So the pathway, sorry if I disconnected. So the pathway for Palestinian women and girls to become inside detention reflects a broader pattern of repression under occupation. What I mean by this is that documented cases and practice shows that the arrest of women happens many times in order to put pressure on male relatives. In such cases, women are detained not because they are the primary target of arrest, but as a way to force a family member to surrender or as retaliation against their relatives. This practice existed way before October 2023, but we are seeing increased cases of that happening where a mother is detained to put pressure on her son or husband, or the use of women to put pressure and on relatives. And again, I needless to say, this is a form of collective punishment. Another major trend that we've seen escalate is the increased arrest of Palestinian women on accusations of so-called incitement, particularly related to online activities on social media, where the Israeli military significantly, expands and interprets incitement to include posts, reposts, a simple like on a Facebook post, expression of opinion, or even interaction with online content like sharing or retweeting. So as a result, we've seen Palestinian women journalists, human rights defenders, and university students being detained based on their digital activities. So basically, the online sphere of freedom of expression effectively became a space of constant surveillance where Palestinian women's speech is monitored and criminalized, and where expression even of grief, of solidarity, of political opinion can lead to arrest. And this is what we've seen since October 2023. And for prisoners, I'll move to detention conditions, but just to emphasize, in a military court where most Palestinians from the West Bank are prosecuted, it's important to understand that the judge is an Israeli military officer, the prosecutor is an Israeli military officer, the language used in this courts is Hebrew, and the law used to criminalize Palestinians is Israeli military law that basically criminalizes every aspect of a Palestinian life. So the system is built in order to keep Palestinians inside detention and not to let them out. I'm going to turn off my camera just because I feel like I'm glitching a little bit. I hope that helps. And I hope your attention is still with me, even without a camera. So when we talk about conditions, I really want to emphasize here that the conditions inside Israeli detention have systematically been against basic rights for Palestinians, even before October 2023. But the difference is, since October 2023, torture, physical violence has been accompanying Palestinian women and girls inside detention from the first moment of their arrest. So it doesn't begin in interrogation. It begins from the moment they are detained during night raids or dawn raids in their homes, and continues up until their transfer in a brutal and humiliating manner, their strip searches, and even their detention, and even their release. So I'll focus these conditions on the main aspects of brutality and humiliation. So needless to say, physical violence and torture accompanies detention, where women are taken from their home, or even from the Gaza Strip, they're taken from checkpoints, from the streets, and the torture journey begins from that moment where they are strip searched. Many of the Palestinian women, and if you understand the Palestinian fabric and society, the body of a woman.
Melina? I think we lost her. Melina, do you hear us? Okay, so that's unfortunate. We lost Melina. It was a very actually important and vital intervention from her side. She was more explaining about the collective punishment that been committed on women, detained women, to put more pressure on family members and relatives. And she was more explaining about the disaster detention conditions and status of detained women, especially university students, school students, mothers, or human rights activists. Melina, you're not there? Okay, just to not to lose time, I'll be moving. Thank you, Melina, so far for your intervention. Maybe later on we can have more catch up to what have been missed. We'll move now to Dr. Rula Serras. Dr. Rula, she's a PhD candidate at business science, specializing in entrepreneurship, business development, and gender equality, with a focus on empowering rural women in Palestine. She holds PhD and master's degree in strategic planning and crisis management. She has extensive experience leading development and humanitarian programs, and currently serves as a director of funding and development at the Rural Women Development Society, Roots. Rula will focus today in her intervention about rural women stands in the face of systematic settlers' violence, focusing on land protection and justice denied. Over to you, Rula.
Thank you very much, Maram. And thank you everyone for attending this important session, because our voices are going to be amplified, even though we're not being to participate physically, but we are still there. Our voices will be reached to all of you through those virtual meeting. I will be presenting a presentation that I will share right now, and that includes some statistics and some testimonies from rural women. I'll be focusing on rural women because, as we know, rural women are always the most marginalized in times of crisis and wars. And then I will be showing a video that we had documented about rural women suffering from terrorist settler attacks and access to their land. For the past 77 years, Palestinian communities have endured illegal occupation, forcible displacement, terrorist attacks, and land confiscation, a systematic oppression that intensified dramatically over the last 2 years. Just a question, you see my presentation, right? Perfect. In Area C,
yes,
which makes up...
Rula, can you make it full screen, please?
Full screen, sure.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, let me, okay, full screen. So I go to the layout, right? Oh, how can, oh wait, just a second. Okay, I do it from here. Okay, is that good? Okay, perfect. So in Area C, perfect. In Area C, which makes up 60% of the West Bank, families live under constant threat, their livelihoods destroyed and communities under siege. At the center of this struggle are Palestinian rural women, and they are the backbone of their communities, feeding families, tending the land, and preserving heritage. Yet, they face systematic violence every day, and as we see in the news, losing access to land, water, and livelihood while enduring direct threats to their safety and dignity from terrorist attacks. This presentation highlights their resilience and courage and the urgent need for protection because their struggle reveals the human cost of occupation. Forcible displacement in Palestine is not only displacing people from their homes, it is also displacing agriculture from the land and undermining the conditions necessary for health and survival. Oh, I can't move it. I mean, I can't go to the next. That's weird. Okay. Rural women are the central of agricultural production in Palestine. They sustain families and they cultivate the land and care for livestock under illegal occupation. Rural women, as we know, provide nearly 70% of agricultural labor and inputs in Palestine. And of course, you can see the references under each point. Since the genocide in Gaza, terrorist settler attacks, incursions, and land confiscation dramatically increased, leaving rural women and rural communities in fear. 43 new settlement outposts established in the West Bank between October 23 and October 24, mostly agricultural grazing areas. Official land confiscation, we're talking about 55,000 dunams since October 2023. And in 2024 alone, 46,000 dunams confiscated. A testimony from Naama Asir, a farmer from Al-Khadr, Bethlehem. She said, I'm quoting her, "They destroyed our house, they destroyed the well we used to water from. The house is gone, and since it went, the grapes have withered, and everything has fallen apart with it. They have surrounded us with settlement from the north and the south, from above and below. We are living in fear, terror, and suffering. Our road from the street above has been closed. We can no longer come from there. We have to come from the street below, and it is all exhausting and difficult, and we carry our belongings with effort and hardship to reach the land." Beyond legal confiscation, settler attacks effective control, making lands inaccessible. We're talking about 786,000 dunams under effective settler control, which constitute around 40% of the West Bank. Includes grazing lands, agricultural hills, Bedouin areas, and water sources. One of the testimonies, Rana Abu Sbeih from Borin, from Borin, Nablus, she says, quoting her, "The olive trees my father planted for decades are now fenced off, grazed by settlers. We cannot reach them, and our animals have less pasture. Yet leaving is not an option. To abandon the land would be the abandon of our heritage and future." 33 communities completely emptied. 85 communities partially displaced. And we're talking here about all the West Bank, from the north to the south. 3,000 people directly and forcibly displaced by terrorist settler attacks. 10,000 forcibly displaced through demolitions and military pressures. There's a testimony from Salwa Odem Ihab, a farmer from Wadi Rahal village in Bethlehem. She said, quoting her, "They threatened to demolish my house and forced me to pay for the demolition and confiscation of my land. They stole our agricultural and construction equipment and forced me to demolish the agricultural room on my land, as well as the wall surrounding it. I had to do this myself right in front of their eyes, fearing they would come back and demolish more of the land and take it over. They didn't stop there. They also destroyed the thyme, apricot, and grape crops in our backyard. They destroyed everything we eat." When we talk about the mechanism of systematic control, they start with a small outpost established, like tents, like livestock sheds. This is how the settlements they start. Armed settler entry for grazing, Palestinian farmers blocked from accessing their land, threats or attacks against rural women and families, and this will create a coercive environment, forcing families to abandon land or live under constant threat. Samira Al-Hathileen from Al Khair, South Hebron Hills, quoting her, "We watch our land from afar, hear the sheep grazing, but cannot reach them. Our hearts break daily, yet we must endure. This is not just land, it is our life, our history, our dignity." What is the impact on rural women and rural communities? They're losing olive harvest, grazing lands and water access, decline in livestock and agricultural productivity, increased labor burden on women, psychological trauma and fear for children. Restricted areas to olive orchards. More than 150,000 dunums of olive orchards became inaccessible due to the settlements, military zones, and the separation wall. Economic and cultural significance. Over olive trees represent 45% of all fruit-bearing trees in the West Bank. They are the primary source of income for tens of thousands of families and a key part of cultural and historical heritage. The seasonal impact on olive harvest attacks. Hundreds of settlers' attacks and farmers were reported during the olive harvest season, preventing thousands of farmers from accessing their land. And we just finished the season. It was in October and November, and we're talking about the majority of farmers couldn't arrive and reach their land to harvest their olives. Total olive trees damaged or destroyed. We're talking about 500,000 olive trees were damaged, destroyed, or affected due to settler attacks, bulldozing, and denial of access. Uprooted or destroyed trees between 2023-2024, we're talking about 728 trees uprooted or destroyed in total. Of these, 37,237 were olive trees specifically. Olive trees destroyed in 2024 alone, we're talking about 31,688 trees were uprooted, cut, or burned. 23,061 of these were olive trees. And one of the testimonies for Shafiqa Manasra Haytham, a farmer from Wadi Fukin village in Bethlehem, she said, quoting her, "We went to pick olives, which are our only source of livelihood. They allowed us to pick, and when we finished, they took what we harvested and prevented us from returning to our land." What could be more frustrating than that? To keep us from harvesting our crops and accessing our land, they are pumping wastewater into us and into the crops we planted and are waiting to harvest to live from. Now we have no land or anything. Now, this is just to show you what are the most affected areas of rural women in the West Bank. We're talking about northern Jordan Valley, and if you look at the map showing here, it shows you how fragmented the Palestinian areas are. We're talking about like cantons in such a in the West Bank that you can see in the pink color. We're talking about, as I said, Jordan Valley, which is a grazing land south of Hebron, mainly Masar Yatta, agricultural villages, eastern Ramallah, new grazing outputs, Nablus and Salfit surroundings. And these are, you can see like in the pink one, as I said, which is area A and B, and the purple one, which is area C. Despite the threats, rural women continue to cultivate the crops and take care of livestock under extreme risks, protect families and food security, preserve cultural heritage, resist forcible displacement. And as Fatima Najwa said, each day is a test of courage. We endure because survival depends on our strength, resilience, and love for this land. Leaving would mean losing everything, our heritage, dignity, and future. Our recommendations to the international community. We want the international community to protect Palestinian rural women and their communities. The international community must do the following: is to end the illegal occupation, fully support and enforce the International Court of Justice ruling that declares the occupation illegal, lobby for international accountability and immediate cessation of expansion and confiscation, hold occupying powers accountable for genocide and killings, investigate and prosecute violations of international law, including acts constituting genocide in Gaza, demand reparations and protection for forcibly displaced communities, support rural women directly, provide protection and resources for women to maintain agriculture and livelihood, ensure access to water, land, and economic support, advocate for women's leadership in decision-making, humanitarian planning, and protection. Why? Because Palestinian rural women are the backbone of their communities, the keepers of heritage, and the protectors of life itself. Supporting them is not a charity, it is justice. Their survival is a test of international accountability and human rights. And thank you all for attending this session. And now we're going to show you a video documenting women violations to women's rights and accessing their land as described by themselves. Can you please, Maram, display the film? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Rula, for this great presentation that gives more insights about the main suffering and most affected rural women, Palestinian women, based on the systematic settler violence. Now we have a short video to be played as a live testimonies from the ground, which is produced by Roots. It's already yeah.
جوزي رش عليه غاز في عينيه وقع على الأرض، ضربوا كمان 2، ابني برضه ضربوه في ايده من البارودة من هان والثاني على ركبته.
هدوا الدار وهدوا البير اللي بكينا نسقي ونرش ونكيم ونحط، وراحت الدار. منها يوم ما راحت اصلا العنب خرب كل الحياة خربت.
انا بهمش، انا بدهم يقتلوني بنتهم، ياخذوني انا مش مشكلة، بس انت املص.
يوم المستوطن مع رعوة غنم فوق أكثر من 100 و150 رأس غنم، بدخل في الأرض، بيكونوا مرات 2 مرات 3 ومسلحين بسلاح كمان. أجوا عليك إحنا مسيدين الأرض كلها، حاطين سياج وحاطين زوايا، بيجوا بالليل يخلعوا الزوايا وباخذوا شيء وباخذوا لهم فوق على المستوطن تبعتهم، حتى بهدوا السلاسل. صرنا حاطين شيء 3 مرات و3 مرات احنا نسويه وهم يخلعوا يروحوا فيه.
انحيطاتنا المستوطنات من الشمال ومن الجنوب، احنا عايشين بخوف وبرعب ومعاناة. يعني هي الطريق من فوق بطلنا نجي، صرنا من تحت ومن تحت صعوبة، يعني بدنا غرضنا نحمله بتعب مشقة.
الأرض لا ما بروح، إن سنة ما لما رحنا العام جد زيتون منعونا أول مرة، ثاني مرة، آخر مرة يطردونا ما يخلونا نلقط ولا نروح ولا نيجي. آخر مرة وقفونا على الجدار وصاروا يحكوا علينا ويغلطوا علينا ويحكونا 4.
في ناس يعني من طاس كانوا بأرضهم، ودنا لهم خبر تعالوا يا عم هي المستوطنين في أرضكم. لما أجوا كل يعني الشباب والهذا نزلوا قاتلوا هو إياهم. جوزي رشوا عليه غاز في عينيه وقع على الأرض، ضربوا كمان 2، ابني برضه ضربوه في ايده من البارودة من هان والثاني على ركبته. خدنا حالنا وطلعنا احنا، هم اللي حكونا، صار ضرب كثير عليهم، شوية اجى الجيش صرنا احنا دوب الدار وخلاهم هم.
اجوا من المستوطنين ما شفناش حدا اجانا، لا احنا فيش ما حدا بتزعلنا اصلا، احنا منطقة مقطوعة.
لما طالعين على الأرض هاي معاهم مكسرات جاهزين بكل شيء، كسكسوا الدوالي، خلعوا الزعتر، بتطخ الرصاص، بجوز 12 خزان خزقونا إياهن على الحيط.
أثر علي فيش يعني دخل علينا، فيش علينا نتيجة يعني لا زيت ولا زيتون ولا جبنة. بعدين هذا رزقك الواحد، إذا ما دخلك أنك منين بدك تروح تجيب، يعني مثلا أنت فقير ما بدك تروح تجيب فيش عليك دخل، إلا إذا تنوت
بنالنا السلاسل والضاءات هذا هو هدها بإيده، يعني إحنا هديناها بإيدينا. إذا أنا ما هديتها بإيدي هم راح يجيبوا لنا بواقر جرافة بتهدها، وإحنا ندفع التكاليف كمان الهدد إلهم.
أعوذ بالله، احنا بنطلع من الأرض تعبنا وشكونا وحياتنا ودمنا والله لو بدفنونا ما بنطلع. احنا صامدين واحنا خط الدفاع الأول، بقاش ولا دور هنا، احنا للأول بقينا ساكنين.
ورغم الصعوبات والتهديدات اللي بتواجهني أنا مصرة إني كل يوم أطلع أتفقد الأرض وأزرعها وأدير بالي عليها، حتى لو هم كانوا موجودين ما بيخوفونيش ولا بيهددوني ولا مسوي لي شيء، وأنا إن شاء الله راح أظلني فيها لما أموت حتى.
Thank you. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope that it gave you a glimpse of what rural women suffer in Palestine. And that's why we urge you to really stand in supporting rural women and the Palestinian communities as a whole, because we need your voices. Your voices can make a difference, and your voices can really, help people and can really support, the people who are facing this genocide. Thank you very much. Thank you. Back to you, Maram.
Thank you, Rula. Such a heartbreaking video of the life testimonies that really suffering from such systematic settlers violence on Palestinian women. Thank you for this. So since Melina's back, and after dealing with the technical issue, we'll get back to her. She has few points to add regarding detention condition. So over to you, Melina.
Yeah, thank you, Maram, and I'm really ashamed and apologize
No
for
worries.
in the century
No.
still I have technical issues, so thank you. But I did want to focus the rest of my intervention was going to go through the detention conditions for Palestinian women and girls in the Damoun prison and Hasharon detention center. You know, since we've seen Israel use starvation as a weapon of war in the Gaza Strip without any attention from the international community to properly stop it from doing that. Unfortunately, that gave Israel the green light to continue to use starvation as a weapon of oppression and control and domination, even inside detention. But the Palestinian women and girls we've spoken to have constantly spoken about systematic denial of adequate food, similar to the rest of the Palestinian detainees in Israeli detention. You know, meals that are provided are lacking proper quality and quantity. What I mean by this is it does not meet the basic nutritional needs for a woman's body, the type of food that is given to them. Usually it's dry food like lentils or beans and without even proper clean water. You know, this is again similar to what Rula was mentioning. Like, this is not we're not calling for a luxury food items inside detention. This is the basic minimum necessity for human dignity and life, is to have a proper food intake inside detention. So this deprivation directly, you know, impacts the women's health, particularly for those already suffering from illnesses. You know, many women spoke about UTIs, urinary tract infection, because of the lack of water and proper food that they were taking. And when we talk about basic necessities as a form, denial of basic necessities as a form of humiliation, we even include, sanitary pads, like as simple as when women have their menstrual cycle, they have to beg Israeli prison guards most of the time male prison guards for sanitary pads in order to deal with their menstrual cycle. So hygiene supplies also have been used as a form of humiliation. Lack of clothes. Women inside detention only have one set of clothes that they have to clean and rewear and reuse. There has been no yard time except for an hour during the 24 hours a day. Only 1 hour of women being able to get out of their cell. And the majority of Palestinian women inside detention wear a hijab, a headscarf. And with the prison male guards inside the prison facility, women, the majority of the time, stay wearing their headscarf, having, the impact of this is they have skin diseases now and rashes. Like women's bodies do not see sunlight or daylight as properly as possible. Another factor is medical neglect. And let me emphasize here, sometimes when I hear medical neglect inside detention, it triggers me a little bit because, if we look at the intention, it's not neglect. When we talk about people with diabetes being denied their insulin shots, this is not neglect. This is intentional deprivation of health treatment as a form of health violence, violations and abuses to the right of health. At least 90 Palestinians have been declared dead or killed inside Israeli detention. And these include clear cases of medical neglect or medical violence. Women have to beg prison guards to go to the clinic. And if they go to the clinic, it's not as if they are treated properly. No, they're given the bare minimum of medical treatment. Like, for example, like painkillers when there is severe pain for the women. So when we talk about delays in medical care, lack of specialized treatment, prolonged detention of those with chronic illnesses and diseases, this directly impacts the right of health and is a form of medical violence, not only medical neglect. Since the beginning of October 2023, all prisons have been completely isolated from the outside world. Family visits have been completely banned since October 2023. And this isolation has profound psychological consequences where many of the women detained are mothers themselves and have been completely cut off from their children for extended periods of time. Their inability to communicate with the family members, combined with the uncertainty of legal procedures and prolonged detention without charge or trial, creates immense emotional and psychological pressure on women. I will end the conditions with, because I've spoken to dozens of released women and girls, what they emphasize the most as brutal torture and brutal humiliation is prison raids, where Israeli special units raid the prison facilities in a brutal way, using physical violence, like using batons to beat women on their sensitive areas, like in the chest and between their legs. And they use pepper spray inside cells. So imagine you're stuck in a 4x4 cell, overcrowded with other detainees, and there's pepper spray inside the cell, leading to a lot of respiratory problems and inhalation problems for Palestinian women. All of them talked about brutal raids where they're dragged by their hair, by their headscarves outside of their cells, forced to strip to their underwear and stand while prison guards, search their cells, search their belongings, and use really brutal humiliation and degradation. The gender-based aspect of their detention is throughout the detention. Again, I emphasize this. Women have repeatedly reported prison guards threatening them of sexual violence, not only threatening them with sexual violence, but imposing and subjecting women through sexual violence, specifically during the invasive strip searches, where even women who were completely naked are pushed above each other and shoved into piles, while prison guards just stand on a side and laugh and use more degrading treatment. For Palestinian women, I'll end with this
Yeah,
detention.
Melina. Yeah.
Therefore, carries distinct gender impacts, separation from their children, restriction on hygiene basic, the broader context of humiliation and isolation. I just want to emphasize here that in order to tackle the conditions of Palestinian women, countries and the international community needs to end their double standards and their hypocrisy when it comes to Palestinian rights. European countries, even the US and Western countries, they are proud of themselves about the protection of women's rights. And they come to Palestinians to talk about, the need to protect Palestinians and include Palestinian women. But when it comes to reality, these Western governments and international community, they lack the proper understanding of how to protect Palestinian women. That is connected. The freedom of Palestinian women is connected to the freedom of Palestine and the liberation of Palestine.
Thank you, Milena.
The community to ensure accountability. Apologies.
Thank you so much for this strong intervention and all these insights that you brought on the condition of the women Palestinian in the detention. Because time is really running, and we have Kifaya. She would be Kifaya Khreib. She's a Palestinian attorney and human rights advocate, known for her commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment. She holds master in international law with experience with teaching and research assistant at Al-Najah University. She currently serves as International Advocacy Officer at Women Centers for Legal Aid and Counseling, WICLAC, documenting violations of international humanitarian and human rights law against Palestinian women and presenting them to UN. Kifaya, just to continue, just was being mentioned by Milena about sexual violence that being committed or threatened in the Israelis prisoners. She would focus more on the sexual violence, the gender crimes, and denial of justice. Over to you, Kifaya.
Thank you so much, Maram. To echo what my colleague Milena has been saying, and to echo all of what my other colleagues has said, the sexual violence incident we have documented and many other Palestinian organizations have documented shows that it's a systematic regime of settler colonial apartheid that is using sexual violence to humiliate and to dominate. It is not isolated incidents. It's not single incidents here and there. It's systemic, and it's being used as a method of forced displacement in many areas. This is something we have documented prior to October 7th. The systematic use of sexual violence in many areas during home invasions and by settlers to forcibly displace Palestinians and to terrorize civilians. I would go on with some of the documentation that we have done, but we can say that sexual violence in the Palestinian context have been used to punish communities as well, in addition to destruction of social structures and to exert control over occupied population. And I will show you this in the documentation that we have done. But mainly documenting sexual violence is so much different than documenting other kind of documentation and violations that are being committed by the Israeli occupation and its settlers, and mainly because of the challenges related to such documentation. I will share my screen with you, and I'm not sure. Just a second. It says sharing is not turned on. So, Madam, if you could give me.
Yes. Just few minutes.
It's okay.
Try now, share Kifaya.
Okay. Oh, you can. Thank you. I just display. Yep. So in many incidents, we have documented how sexual violence was used while looting women in areas in Gaza at checkpoints like Netzarim. Israeli soldiers knew women would have the valuable stuff, the jewelry, the documentation, and they would loot women in the process, taking all of their belongings. We have also seen sexual violence being committed in detention centers, like Melina said, and the vast majority of women we have interviewed, which were over 50 women, said that they have been exploited and they have been exposed to sexual violence, including rape in 3 incidents we have documented, in addition to invasive searches, like Melina said, using inspection devices being inserted in women's genitals. In many incidents also, we have seen types of sexual violence, like in this picture you can see here, in this position, this woman was forced to say things of sexual nature in front of her male family members This picture was taken by Israeli soldiers on the spot. This woman is Maha from Jenin refugee camp, and I always like to emphasize that this picture was taken in July 2023, where this woman was forced to strip search in a room, and she tried to close the door to hide her body and to have some dignity away from her family members and the Israeli soldiers. For that, she was beaten on her eye, and she lost sight completely in her left eye. In many also incidents, like sexual violence does not happen in detention. It does not just happen by Israeli soldiers while home invasions. In this video, you can see 5-year-old Sama trying to enter a checkpoint in Hebron. She's yelling at the soldier to open the door for her so she could enter the space, which is quite closed at this point. Sorry for that. As you see the schoolgirls exiting the checkpoint, this is where the sexual violence mostly happens. It's closed rooms, it's away from the sight of the public. It's where the Israeli soldiers take their time molesting and having other sorts of sexual violence to women in such spaces. In Jerusalem as well, we have documented similar incidents in which women have been subjected to sexual violence, getting beaten or their genitals as well. Lena was detained for simply telling the soldier who asked her why she was wearing green today by saying none of your business, and for that she was beaten on her genitals for over 4 hours under the surveillance of cameras. We see also the same incidents in Hebron where a woman was detained and inspection devices were used to rape her in this incident in detention as well. I will stop sharing the screen, but also to say the overall impact of sexual violence on the Palestinian community is mostly women being dropped out of schools early because families don't want their women, the girls, to commute to universities, to commute to schools, and having sexual violence at checkpoints, having sexual violence in public spaces. We have also seen a high rate of early marriages as families try to send their daughters out of the areas in which sexual violence happens often. We have also seen higher rates of domestic violence incidents in which these areas are constantly attacked by settlers. Also, to echo what my colleague Milena has said, the fact that the failure of the international community to even address or to hold the Israeli occupation forces and its settlers accountable had led in the Palestinian communities overall losing faith, and losing faith in the international law and the international law mechanisms has also led to people not wanting to work with organizations that focus on human rights, not wanting to give their testimonies as a result of that, and not wanting to work or to even provide like consultancy for these people because they have lost faith and they have associated all of these crimes and the silence of the international communities with human rights organizations that try to work on that. To end, we have also to say that some forms are not highlighted in the international law. So when you talk about sexual violence within the Palestinian context, some violence and sexual violence is being left out. For example, talking about verbal sexual violence that schoolgirls are being subjected to while commuting to schools in Jerusalem mainly and in Hebron areas. Israeli soldiers and settlers always intend to say things of sexual nature in Arabic. For these schoolgirls who are minors, they say that to them, they sexually say things of sexual natures, they grab their genitals in front of the schoolgirls. And these girls have been prevented from going to schools because they don't want to face this on a daily basis and because their families want to protect them as well. You don't see this kind of sexual violence being documented or talked about as much. Also, the documentation we have made also says that Israeli soldiers know very well of the existing taboo concerning sexual violence within the Palestinian community, which has led them to actually use sexual violence because they know women are not going to report this. They are less likely to talk about it. So they have used this knowledge of the stigma that we have and against women and children as well in detention centers, as we have documented. Also, the documentation that we have collected from Jerusalem, Hebron, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank as well also indicates that many forms of sexual violence were used systematically in detention centers, which suggests that there might have been a directive that's been given to the soldiers and the occupation forces to actually subject women to these kind of violence and assaults as well. Over to you, Maram. Thank you.
شكرا كفاية. Thanks a lot for sharing such an important and essential documentation on sexual violence, and we assure that sexual violence is not new since it's been more before since 7th October, but it's more systematic, the use of sexual violence. Thanks a lot for this intervention. So I will give more chance and open the chance now, the room for any questions or open discussion Q&A session. You may raise your hand for sharing any comment or having any question. We'll be happy to yeah. في raising hands شايف. Okay. Amal Khrecha, she's adding on the chat, accountability denied, justice delayed. The daily Israeli violation of the national rights of the Palestinian people are endangering the security of the region and the world. Therefore, the implementation of the Article United for Peace by the UN is necessary to stop the genocide crimes in the Gaza Strip and in the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. Yeah, thank you. Amal? Okay. So if there's no questions or raised hands, because I don't see any hands raised, we just wanted to make sure that for such an event that we have this parallel event through this CSW 70 session, at the end we call for.
May I before you
Yes.
end the session? I
Amal?
raised my hand, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. تفضلي. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just I would like, to add that despite the extensive documentation of Israeli settler colonial and apartheid policies in numerous international reports issued by the United Nations structures, the European Union, the Global Human Rights Organization, the Palestinian Women Human Rights, and the Feminist Organization, the current moment exposes a profound crisis in the international system. The strategic alliance between the Israeli occupation and the United States administration has reached to a stage where the political architecture of the Middle East is being reshaped according to the geopolitical interests that only disregards the international law and the principles of justice and human rights. What is going on in Iran and the Middle East as a whole, approve this kind of, strategic relationship and partnership between the two governments. What is particularly alarming today for all women, actually, who struggle for justice and liberation is not only the ongoing violations on the ground, but also the systematic targeting, the erosion of the very institution meant to safeguard global order, including the United Nations and the framework of international law itself. When international norms are undermined, the institutions and weakened the United Nations and narrowing the space of accountability and impunity, actually preventing Palestinian women from attending the 70th session of CSW is, revealing, the weakened and challenging that the UN face. We demand as Palestinian women with other women, Arab women and other human rights organizations in the region to move this session from New York to Geneva to allow women from 75 countries, I mean the southern global countries to
Global South
allow
countries,
them,
yes.
to participate in this session, which is supposed to deal with justice and to enhance justice to open accesses for justice for girls and women all over the world. So actually, what I think is very important is how to develop, global alliance from women organization to face and challenge this new liberal imperialism, approach and policies to also amplify women voices for peace and human security after the failure of all these international community structures to protect women in Gaza and to, provide a glass of water to the children of Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you, Amal, for this comment. Yes, we also recommend all to share more the voices of women, amplify women voices of Palestinian women worldwide, and especially for the issue relating to the barring of Palestinian women and other countries from participating physically in the CSW, which is part of the advocacy digital campaign, which is launched by the Palestinian Feminist Organization. So we encourage you all to be part of this campaign. At the end, we just wanted to make sure that the main issues that being raised is very important, and what we call is for mainly end occupation and culture of impunity, call for accountability, international action, inclusive justice frameworks that amplify Palestinian women's voices and experience, and affirm that Palestinian feminist voices will not be silenced, not through CSW and any other platforms. At the end, I'd like to thank you all, the speakers, first for this strong and brave intervention that you did on different sectors. Thanks a lot for this great intervention and presentation. Thanks you all for attending this event, and we hope that more and more series of events will come soon. I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.